Part 3, after they left, expanded, the door clicked shut behind Luke's friends. And for a few seconds, the silence felt almost too heavy to touch. The apartment, once filled with voices and laughter, now seemed to breathe again. The candlelight flickered against the wall, casting soft gold shadows across the room. Emma sat quietly, her hands resting on her knees, her thoughts somewhere between relief and hesitation. Luke stood by the door, his head lowered slightly as if trying to gather his thoughts before speaking. He turned to her with a faint, apologetic smile. "That wasn't how tonight was supposed to go," he said, his tone half defeated but still gentle. Emma smiled softly, trying to ease his worry. "You don't have to apologize. It happens. Your friends seem great." "Yeah, they are," he said, walking back toward her. "Just terrible at reading hints." She laughed quietly, and the sound filled the space with warmth again. The tension slowly began to fade. Luke sat beside her, the same spot where they had started the night, and for a moment neither spoke. There was something about the silence that felt honest, not awkward, but full of things neither knew how to say. He glanced at her, his voice quieter now. "I wanted to spend more time with you tonight. Just you. I thought maybe—" He paused, searching for words. "Maybe we'd get a chance to actually talk. Properly." Emma looked at him, her heart softening. "We still can," she said. "The night's not over." That simple sentence seemed to shift the air again. Luke leaned back, exhaling slowly, as if the weight of the evening had finally lifted. "You're kind," he said with a small grin. "Most people would have run out the minute the noise started." "I thought about it," she teased. "But then I saw you trying so hard to make it work. I couldn't just leave," Luke chuckled, shaking his head. "You really stayed through the chaos for me." "Maybe," she said, her smile soft but teasing. "Maybe I wanted to see what kind of person you are when things don't go as planned." He looked at her for a long moment. "And what did you find out?" "That you care," she said simply, "even when things get messy." The way she said it caught him off guard. He didn't reply right away, just watched her, the calm confidence in her tone, the light in her eyes. She wasn't trying to flatter him. She was just being honest. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind a quiet hum of the city. From the window, the lights of other buildings shimmered faintly, making the whole night feel softer, slower. Emma leaned back into the couch, her shoulders relaxing. She hadn't expected to feel this at ease. Luke spoke again after a pause. I used to think connection was supposed to be instant, like something dramatic or loud. But tonight?" He smiled faintly. "Tonight made me realize it can also be quiet." Emma nodded. "Sometimes quiet is better. You notice more." He tilted his head. "Like what?" "Like the way you always make sure everyone's comfortable," she said, her voice low but sincere. "Or how you kept looking at me even when your friends were talking." Luke laughed softly, a little embarrassed. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything," she said, smiling. "It's a habit." Something about the moment felt fragile but beautiful, like the beginning of something neither wanted to rush. Luke stood up, stretching slightly, and then looked toward the kitchen. "Do you want another cup of coffee before you head out? I promise it's fresh this time." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, why not?" He disappeared into the kitchen, and she listened to the familiar sounds, the kettle, the quiet hum of the machine, the faint clink of cups. There was something comforting about it, as if the noise was part of a small rhythm they were both learning. She looked around the apartment again, the books, the soft light, the warmth that still lingered. It felt like a place she could come back to. When Luke returned, he handed her the cup carefully. Their fingers brushed again, a tiny spark of warmth in the quiet. "Careful," he said. "Still hot." "Thanks," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat side by side again, sipping their coffee slowly, both aware that the night was coming to an end. Still, neither moved to finish it too quickly. After a while, Emma set her cup down and sighed softly. "I should probably go," she said, though she didn't sound ready to leave. Luke nodded, his voice low. "Can I walk you out?" "Of course," she said. He grabbed her coat and held it open for her. The small gesture made her heart twist in a quiet, unexpected way. As they stepped into the hallway, the air outside felt cooler, cleaner. The city lights painted soft reflections on the floor as they walked together toward the elevator. Neither spoke much on the way down, but the silence wasn't empty. It was comfortable now, full of what they didn't need to say. When they reached her car, Emma turned to face him. "I had a good time tonight," she said, "even with the surprise guests." He smiled, his eyes warm. "I'm glad you stayed. I don't think I've laughed that much in a while or felt this comfortable." She looked up at him. "Comfortable is a good start." "Yeah," he said, "but I hope it's not where we stop." Emma smiled softly, a little surprised at his honesty. "I don't think it will be." The street was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. The world around them seemed to fade for a moment. Luke took a small step closer, not too near, just enough that she could feel his warmth. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Next time, I'll make sure it's just us. No interruptions." "I'll hold you to that," she said. He laughed gently, and for a brief moment, neither wanted to move. The air between them was full, not with words or promises, but with quiet understanding. Finally, she reached for her car door. "Good night, Luke. Good night, Emma." She started the engine, and as she drove off, Luke stood on the sidewalk, watching until her taillights faded into the distance. The night felt colder without her there, but in a good way, like something had been left behind. A trace of warmth that made him feel alive inside her car. Emma couldn't stop smiling. The evening had turned out nothing like she imagined, yet somehow it felt exactly right. She thought about his laughter, the way he looked at her even when surrounded by others, the way his voice softened when he said her name. There was something real there, something she hadn't felt in a long time as she merged onto the quiet road. She whispered to herself, "Next time." The words carried a promise, not rushed, not uncertain, but hopeful. Back at his apartment, Luke cleaned up the leftover cups, still thinking about her. Every sound, the tap of the mug, the closing of the cabinet, reminded him of their laughter, their brief silences, and the look she gave him when she said goodbye. He smiled to himself, realizing he was already looking forward to seeing her again. For both of them, that night became something unexpected, not perfect, but honest. A start that didn't need fireworks or grand gestures. Just two people meeting in the middle of life's small surprises. Finding a quiet connection. Part 1. The decision. Emma had always been the kind of woman who planned everything from the way she brewed her morning coffee to the way she folded her clothes before bed. Her apartment in downtown Seattle was neat, quiet, and filled with everything she thought she wanted. Yet lately, silence had started to feel too loud. The steady rhythm of her days no longer brought comfort. It felt more like a cage disguised as peace. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done something that truly made her heart race. That Friday evening, she came home from work and stood by the large window overlooking the glowing city. Cars passed below, people hurried by, their lives moving faster than hers ever seemed to. She wondered when she had started living so safely. Maybe it was after her last heartbreak, or maybe after realizing that most people only stayed for a while. Whatever it was, the walls she had built around herself were strong and lonely. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, aimlessly tapping between social apps she barely used. That's when she stumbled upon an old group chat, College Reunion NYC. The chat had been silent for years. She smiled faintly at the familiar names. Mark, Lauren, Ethan. They had once been inseparable. The kind of friends who stayed up late, dreaming about the future, swearing they'd never drift apart. But life had happened. Careers, moves, relationships, all of it had slowly stretched the distance between them. Emma hesitated for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She thought about Ethan first. Quiet, thoughtful, the one who always understood her better than she understood herself. There had always been something unspoken between them, something warm but unfinished. Then there was Mark, charming and bold, always the center of attention. and Lauren, her best friend through every heartbreak and every bad haircut. They all represented a version of her. She had lost freer, more alive. Dot. Without overthinking, she typed a message. What if we all met again? My place, Friday night. Her heart pounded as soon as she sent it. For a moment, she considered deleting it. It's been too long, she thought. They've moved on. This is silly. But before she could, her phone buzzed. Lauren replied first. Are you serious? I miss you. I'll bring the wine. Then Mark, count me in. It's been forever. And finally, Ethan, I'd like that. Those thorn that felt strong enough to build on, and though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew the story wasn't over yet. Part 3 ends around 1,000 words, fast-paced, romantic, emotionally mature, and fully compliant with YouTube monetization policies. Part 2. The night of what-ifs for day evening arrived, and Emma's apartment glowed softly under the warm light of candles. The scent of vanilla filled the air, blending with the faint rhythm of slow music playing in the background. She had spent hours preparing not just the food or the space, but herself. Every corner of her home reflected effort, care, and a quiet nervousness. She kept checking the clock, pacing between the kitchen and the living room, rehearsing conversations in her head that might never happen. When the doorbell finally rang, her breath caught. Lauren was first. She burst in with her usual energy, her laughter bright and familiar. Emma, you look incredible. Oh, this place, wow! They hugged tightly, the kind of hug that says, I've missed you more than I said. Moments later came Mark, carrying a bottle of red wine. He greeted her with his confident grin. Still the best host in the group, he teased, looking around approvingly. Then came the last knock. Ethan, the sound was softer, almost hesitant. When she opened the door, he stood there with that same calm expression she remembered from years ago. His smile was small, but genuine. Hey, Emma, he said. Just 2 words, but her heart raced. The 4 of them gathered around the table, and for a while it felt like nothing had changed. They laughed about old college stories, late-night pizza runs, failed exams, silly pranks. The years melted away as they shared memories like pages of an old photo album. Yet beneath the laughter, Emma felt something deeper, something stirring quietly, a mix of nostalgia and longing. As the night went on, the tone shifted. The conversation drifted from light jokes to more personal confessions. Lauren talked about her recent breakup, admitting how hard it was to pretend she was okay. Mark shared how work success didn't feel as satisfying as he once imagined. There was honesty in the air, the kind that only old friends could share without judgment. Then Ethan spoke. It's strange, he said, his voice low but steady. We spend years chasing things, jobs, goals, approval, and then one day we wake up and realize we don't even know if we're happy. The room fell quiet for a moment. Emma looked at him, realizing he wasn't just talking about himself. She could see it in his eyes, that same search for meaning she'd been feeling for months. She replied softly, maybe we just get too comfortable. It's easier to stay safe than to take risks. Ethan's eyes met hers. Comfort can be dangerous, he said. It keeps you from finding out who you really are. The words lingered between them, quiet but powerful. For a brief moment, it felt like the rest of the room disappeared. Then Lauren laughed to break the tension, changing the subject. But Emma's mind stayed on Ethan's words. As the night deepened, they moved to the couch, glasses refilled, voices softer. The city lights outside flickered through the windows like stars. Emma watched her friends, the people who once knew her best, and felt an ache she couldn't explain. She had missed this feeling of belonging, of being seen. She realized how much she had closed herself off over the years. Too afraid to let anyone close enough to hurt her again, when Mark started teasing her about her perfectly organized life, she laughed it off. But Ethan didn't. He looked at her and said quietly, You've always been strong, Emma, but maybe it's time to let someone see the parts of you that aren't. His words weren't flirtatious or heavy. They were honest, kind, and something about them touched a place in her she thought was long gone. Later, when Lauren went to the balcony and Mark stepped away to take a call, Emma and Ethan found themselves alone for the first time that night. The music hummed low and the candlelight painted soft shadows across his face. "I almost didn't come," he admitted. "Why?" she asked, curious but careful. He looked down, thinking. "Because I wasn't sure if seeing you again would make things easier or harder." Emma's breath caught. And did it. He smiled faintly. Both. She didn't know what to say. For a moment, their silence felt louder than words. There was no need for dramatic declarations. The truth was already in the way. They looked at each other, years of unspoken feelings wrapped in quiet understanding. When the others returned, the atmosphere lightened again. Lauren suggested a toast to old friends and to finding ourselves again. They raised their glasses, laughter returning, but something had changed. There was a new current beneath the surface, subtle, emotional, alive. As midnight approached, one by one, her friends started to leave. Mark gave her a playful wink and said, "Don't wait another 5 years to do this again." Lauren hugged her tightly and whispered, "You needed this, didn't you?" Emma nodded. When Ethan reached the door, he paused. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly. "It meant more than you know." She smiled softly. "It did for me too." For a moment, neither moved. Then he gave her a look that lingered, gentle but full of something unspoken. A promise. For maybe just a question left hanging in the air. When he finally turned to leave, Emma stood there, watching until he disappeared down the hall. The apartment felt different after everyone was gone. The music still played softly, but the silence had a new weight to it. Not empty, just thoughtful. Emma walked around the living room, picking up glasses and straightening things. Her mind replaying the night. Ethan's words echoed again and again. Comfort can be dangerous. She sat down by the window, looking out at the sleeping city. The night had started as a simple reunion, but it had become something deeper, a reminder of who she used to be. And who she still could be. It wasn't about falling in love or chasing the past. It was about rediscovering the courage to open up again, to trust that not every risk ends in heartbreak. She realized that testing her limits wasn't about doing something reckless. It was about allowing herself to feel, to be vulnerable, to remember that life is meant to be lived, not just managed. As she finished cleaning, she noticed Ethan's empty glass still sitting on the table. She smiled softly, tracing the rim with her finger before setting it aside. There was no confusion in her heart, only a quiet certainty that something new had begun. That night, Emma didn't feel lonely. She felt awake for the first time in years. The world seemed full of color again, the kind of color that comes from emotion, hope, and the faint thrill of possibility. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Her limits were no longer walls. They were doors waiting to be opened. Part 3. What followed the next morning, Emma woke to the soft light of dawn slipping through her curtains. Her apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city outside. Empty glasses sat on the coffee table, and the faint scent of candle wax still lingered in the air. She sat up slowly, her thoughts drifting back to the night before, the laughter, the confessions, and Ethan's eyes meeting hers in that still moment before he left. It all felt like a dream, but one that had stirred something deep inside her. She made herself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. For years she had built a careful routine, but this morning felt different. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt meaningful, like the calm after a storm she didn't know she needed. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "I didn't say everything I wanted to last night. Can we talk?" Emma's pulse quickened. She read it again and again, unsure what he wanted to say, but she didn't hesitate long. Her fingers typed back before her mind could interfere. "Yes, when?" His reply came almost instantly. "This afternoon? Same cafe by the river." She smiled faintly. It was their old spot from college, the one where they used to meet between classes, talking for hours about everything and nothing. She hadn't been there in years, but the memory of it brought warmth to her chest. The day passed slowly. She cleaned, read a few pages of a book she couldn't focus on, okay, and changed her outfit twice before deciding on something simple, a soft cream sweater and jeans. She wanted to look like herself, not someone trying too hard when she arrived at the cafe. The familiar sound of chatter and clinking cups greeted her. The place hadn't changed. The same wooden tables, the same view of the river through the tall glass windows. Ethan was already there, sitting near the window, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. He looked up the moment she walked in, his face lighting with a small, genuine smile. "Hey," he said as she sat down. "Hey," she replied softly, trying to steady her heartbeat. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind that held meaning. Finally, Ethan took a slow breath. "Last night made me realize something," he began. "We've all changed, but you still have that same calmness. The kind that makes people feel safe. But I also saw something else you've been holding back from life. Maybe even from yourself." Emma looked at him, unsure how to respond. His tone wasn't critical. It was gentle, understanding. "I guess I got used to playing it safe," she admitted. "It's easier not to get hurt that way." "I know," he said quietly. "I did the same. I built a life that looked perfect on paper, but it doesn't feel like living. Last night reminded me what it felt like to actually connect with someone again." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew exactly what he meant. The laughter, the openness, it had awakened something in both of them. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "When you invited us, I almost didn't come. I thought it would just bring back things I'd buried. But being there, it reminded me of what I've missed. Not just the friendship," but he stopped himself, choosing his words carefully. "The feeling of being around someone who makes life feel a little more real." Emma looked down at her hands, her heart pounding. "I felt that too," she said finally. "I didn't expect it. I just wanted to see everyone again, but it turned into something else. Something deeper." Ethan smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "Maybe we needed that reminder that life isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to make you feel." They talked for hours after that, catching up not just on years apart, but on everything they'd never said. Ethan told her about his failed engagement, how he had convinced himself he was happy when he wasn't. Emma shared how she'd built walls after her last breakup, pretending independence was the same as peace. They laughed about old memories and sat quietly through the heavier moments. Every word felt easy, natural, as if time had only paused, not passed. When their coffees were long finished, Ethan looked at her with a sincerity that made her breath hitch. "I don't know where this goes," he said. "I just know that when I left your apartment last night, it felt like I'd said goodbye to the past, but hello to something new." Emma felt a soft warmth spread through her. "Maybe testing my limits wasn't about doing something wild," she said. "Maybe it was just about letting life in again, and people too." He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "That sounds like the beginning of something worth trying." They left the cafe together and walked by the river, the wind gentle, the afternoon sun painting golden reflections on the water. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. The air between them felt light but meaningful. She could feel the past quietly fading, replaced by something honest and unhurried. Ethan turned to her before they parted ways. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Emma smiled, her heart steady this time. "I'd like that." As she walked home, the world looked different, brighter, fuller. She noticed things she hadn't paid attention to in a long time. The laughter of strangers, the rhythm of footsteps on the sidewalk, the glow of the sunset spreading across the skyline. Everything felt alive again. When she returned to her apartment, it no longer felt empty. She sat on the couch, remembering the night of the reunion, the moments of laughter and the quiet truths that had surfaced. She realized that testing her limits hadn't been about breaking rules or chasing danger. It was about courage, the courage to let herself feel joy, vulnerability, and hope again. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Ethan made it home. "Thanks for meeting me today. Feels like something started." She smiled and typed back, "Maybe it did." The evening faded into a calm night. She lit one candle, poured herself a cup of tea, and stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer. Somewhere inside her, a door had opened. Not because of love alone, but because she had finally allowed herself to live again. Emma knew life wouldn't suddenly become perfect. There would still be quiet days, lonely hours, and questions without answers. But for the first time, that didn't scare her. She had found something steadier than certainty: connection, courage, and the belief that starting over didn't mean starting from nothing. As the city lights flickered below, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." And she meant it.